Welcome to Every Church a Peace Church, a program that promotes the belief that every church could turn the world towards peace if every church lived and taught as Jesus lived and taught. My name is Don Edwards, and I'm your host for today's program. And with us today, we're honored to have as a guest Dr. Rocco A. Errico. Dr. Errico is a minister and a scholar and an author of several books. This one I'm holding up is the Aramaic Light of the Gospels of Mark and Luke, as well as other books that he's written. Dr. Errico is a scholar in the ancient Middle Eastern culture, as well as a scholar in the ancient Middle Eastern language of Aramaic, the language of Jesus, the language that Jesus and his disciples lived and spoke. Welcome, Dr. Errico.
Thank you.
I would like the viewers to get a little understanding of the Aramaic language, and we generally think that Jesus spoke Hebrew. That's what I thought. But tell us a little bit about what the Aramaic language is and that sources, where it came from.
Okay. Well, the word itself, Aramaic, comes from Aram in Aramaic, which means high. So it was the language of the highlands. For instance, the country we call Syria today was really Aram from Aramaic. Mm-hmm. And all that whole area where the Arameans were, or Arameans, either way you want to put it. Mm-hmm. I like to say Arameans because people get it confused with Armenians, and Armenians is something completely different. Mm-hmm. This is Arameans, and Syria was called Aram. It was the ancient language of the ancient Middle East, and it dominated the entire Middle East, the entire Fertile Crescent.
Before Hebrew?
Before Hebrew.
Okay.
And Hebrew comes, that is, the roots of Hebrew come from the Aramaic language, and the roots of Arabic come from the Aramaic language also. And the Palestinian dialect of Arabic is very close to the Aramaic language, you know, the roots of it and how they say it. And Jesus was an Aramaic-speaking Semite. And when he taught, when he healed, and his apostles, when they taught, whatever they did it all in the Aramaic language. And there's a big difference. When we come from Aramaic into English, we discover in the scriptures there are about 12,000 differences. So
well, that's a lot of difference.
Yes, it is.
I guess that could be, with those differences, it's not easy. It's easy to see that how the Western perception of Jesus could be different from the Middle Eastern perception.
Even of God.
Of God.
Yes, because it says God is a jealous God, you know. But in Aramaic, it's zealous, not jealous. So it's not only do we get a different picture of Jesus, but we also get a different picture about God. And even the scriptures, it says, for instance, in King James, it says that God is angry every day, you know. But in the Aramaic, it says, behold, God is not angry every day. He is a just judge. See?
So through the various translations and the retranslations and going from
Semitic languages to Western languages,
a lot is pulled out.
A lot has changed.
And put in, I suppose.
And put in, oh yes, there's been additions and omissions made. But it's generally mistakes in translation, you see. But this is the first time we can view it from this language, which helps clarify a lot of things. A lot of harsh sayings, so-called, of Jesus' sayings, weren't really harsh at all. You have to understand it from that Semitic culture and the language, you see.
Well, if you're interested in knowing in more detail about that, you could always get one of Dr. Errico's books, which are available at the bookstore at Hillside Chapel and Truth Center. The Aramaic Light of the Gospels, Mark and Luke, John.
And I have Matthew.
So if you want to get the original interpretations of the teachings of Jesus, as well as of the original scriptures interpreted from the original Aramaic, then that would be the source you would go to.
Right, and the Bible, too.
And the Bible.
Now, Dr. Lanza, my teacher,
tell us about this Bible.
Okay, this is where it makes all the 12,000 corrections.
Okay.
See, going from Aramaic, from Genesis all the way to Revelation, this Bible was translated from ancient Aramaic manuscripts. Where were they found? For the Old Testament in the British Museum, 464 A.D. This is on the Old Testament. And in the Vatican, which is the 6th century, had the complete Old Testament in Aramaic. It was originally in Milan, Italy, in the Ambrosianus library. It was called the Ambrosianus Codex, but it's now at the Vatican. And he translated from those manuscripts. And the New Testament is in the Smithsonian Institute, in the Freer Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And I have photostats of those also, where he translated from Aramaic into English.
Well, what does, since this program is called Every Church a Peace Church, what is peace in the Aramaic language?
This is wonderful. In all 3 Semitic languages, it means the same thing. I refer to Aramaic, Hebrew, and Arabic. In Aramaic, we say shlama. In Hebrew, we say shalom. And in Arabic, we say salam. The root of the word means not to be just, calm and tranquil. They have a word for that. The word means to surrender.
Surrender.
To surrender, meaning to surrender to God, you see. And that's the meaning of peace. When they greeted one another, for instance, if we had come on the air and I wanted to greet you in Aramaic, I would say, originally, I would say to you, Shlamalach. You hear the word shlama, shlamalach, literally translated peace. In modern language, it means hello, or hi.
Yeah.
But in the ancient form, it meant I surrender to you. And when you greet me back, you say, shlamalach back to me.
Shlamalach.
Shlamalach. Which means I surrender to you. When we both surrender to each other, we're at peace with one another. I won't hurt you, you won't hurt me. We protect one another.
That's a good way to stop wars, is that both sides surrender to each other.
Yeah, that is true. Faisal, the Arabic king, this goes back in the 1920s, 1918, something like that. When he was at war, I forgot which tribe he was with, and he demanded unconditional surrender. And, of course, they are Muslims. And he wanted unconditional surrender. He defeated the tribal group that came against him. But when he met the chieftain and he demanding the unconditional surrender, which is a shameful thing in the Near East or the Middle East, when he saw him, he greeted him with peace, with salam. And he said, we are brothers. I surrender to you. You surrender to me. We surrender to God. And they were at peace, they ate together and everything, and he dropped that unconditional thing.
Well, that's the way we should get along.
That's because they practiced. Yes. He practiced his religion of Islam.
Well, the Christian could also practice
the teachings of Jesus. Right.
In that same way. I guess by loving your enemy. If you don't see the enemy, you see a fellow human being, you see a part of you that both your quote enemy and you are both under God's guidance. And
everyone is a child of God, even when they go astray.
Yes.
That's when Jesus went for those who went astray, because he recognized they were God's children too, but they had lost their way.
Yes.
You see?
God's righteousness falls on the just and the unjust.
His sun shines on the good and the wicked, and his rain falls upon the just and the unjust. This is a tremendous, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a tremendous statement of Jesus that is misunderstood. It's translated correctly, but the meaning is gone. Where he tells his disciples, when he just made this statement to them, that their Father in heaven lets his rain fall on the just and the unjust, and lets his sun shine upon the good and the bad. And then he says, now be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Now to us, how can we be as perfect as God? That sounds ridiculous. And this is why often we brand Jesus as an idealist, you see. But what he said was, when translated and the meaning given to us, instead of saying perfect, it's not wrong to use that word, but the meaning got lost. It means be all-inclusive. So what Jesus was saying is, now be inclusive, even as your Father in heaven is inclusive. Don't separate yourself from people. Don't demonize people. Don't dehumanize people. Be inclusive, not exclusive. And Christianity and most religions, because it has become a club, it has become exclusive.
Yeah.
And you have to follow certain tenets in order to be to join that club.
Yeah.
Whereas the real meaning, what Jesus didn't intend any of this,
Yeah.
no hierarchy. His main thrust was the kingdom of God and the all-inclusiveness of God's presence.
Yes. Well, the inclusiveness of Christianity, as spoken by Jesus, also includes the same type of inclusiveness of Muhammad, in terms of the Quran is an inclusive book. Was it not, or am I going astray on that one?
Muhammad did teach to have peace with your neighbors, see, and to be tolerant towards Christians and Jews. It's there. And there's also some negative things there, too. But I'm not an expert in the Quran. I just know the basic things of the Quran.
Well, before we, I want to ask you about what was Jesus' purpose? What was his intent? Why did he come and say the things that he did? What was his purpose? But before we do, we're going to take a short break and listen to the beautiful sounds of Theresa Hightower and Mose Davis as they sing a very wonderful, uplifting tune that was done by John Lennon called Imagine.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you'll try. There's no hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there are no countries. It isn't hard to do. To kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And maybe someday you will join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And maybe someday you will join us, and the world will be as one, yeah. We'll be as one, yeah. Maybe we can be as one, the way that God meant for us to be. We'll be as one.
Imagine. Thank you, Theresa Hightower and Mose Davis. Beautiful, beautiful message where we can imagine where there's no killing and no hate, that we can join together and be as one. Before we talk, Dr. Errico, about Jesus' mission, let me ask you, what is, and we've talked a little bit about this before the break, about the word peace. What is the combination of peace and church? Since this is every church a peace church, what is the word, the meaning of peace and church from an Aramaic perspective?
It's a very good question. The word church in Aramaic is the word eta, and it means a gathering, but it comes from the root meaning to throw a party.
Oh.
To celebrate.
Okay.
See? So a gathering that throws a party, that celebrates. And what are they celebrating? They're celebrating God in their midst. So when we say, literally from an Aramaic perspective now I'm speaking, every church a peace church, it means every church that celebrates the teachings of Jesus surrenders to God. See? When you surrender, what does it mean to surrender to God? Now that's got to be clarified. When we say surrender to God, we know what the New Testament tells us, that God is love, God is peace, is joy, is understanding, is harmony. So when we say every church a peace church, it means every church, that is, will celebrate their surrender to God, their surrender to love, their surrender to harmony, to joy. This is what it means, you see.
So we have to, whatever instincts or feelings we may have of oppressing or hating or killing or violence, we must release that and surrender to God.
To God, right? Instead of what I want. Instead of being bigoted or hatred or violence, then when I surrender to God, then which is love and joy and harmony, that takes over. See? Which ties us into what you had asked me before the little intermission, and that is, what was Jesus' purpose? What was his mission? His whole message, his gospel, the gospel according to Jesus, is the kingdom of God. He preached God's and declared and demonstrated by his sayings, by his parables, by his actions, and by his healing, that God's presence was now among humanity, that it was here now, and that if we would surrender to that's what it means, kingdom of God. It means the sovereign presence and counsel of God active in the earth now. He says the kingdom of God is at hand. That's what Mark tells us, which means is here. That means God's presence, God's working, God's activity. And what is God's activity? What is God's working? Love and joy and harmony and surrender, which we call peace. You see, this is what it is. So every church a peace church, and Jesus' mission of the kingdom of God go hand in hand.
Well, how did we move from that? I mean,
because we get away from the teachings of Jesus. We're interested more in our beliefs and being right in doctrinal beliefs than we are in right action. You see. And then a lot of people interpret right action by right beliefs. That is, if you believe a certain way, But no, Jesus had no theology. He did not have a theology at all. All he kept emphasizing, look what we call the Sermon on the Mount, which was no sermon on any mount, but we call it that.
Mm-hmm.
What does he bless? Who does he bless? Mm-hmm. He blessed are those who are poor in pride, mm-hmm. or those who surrender to God. That's literally what it says in the Aramaic.
Yeah.
What our Bible say is poor in spirit. Or he says, blessed are the peacemakers. Mm-hmm. They still have peacemakers in the Middle East today. Peacemakers are those people outside the city gates in the ancient world. Today, they're still even in the modern world, in Lebanon and in many places in the Middle East, where they help people surrender to each other if they're in a fight.
Well, when we say blessed are the peacemakers, for they are the children of God, I guess that's the
right, because
the second part.
They're like God. They help people surrender, you see.
Well, we may say that we're blessing the peacemakers, but we're celebrating the war makers. We're elevating the war makers. We're glorifying the war and violence. And the Christians are, of course, doing this. Why are we continue to separate ourselves from what is clearly the wrong way? And will that result in consequences to us?
Yes, it's resulting in consequences. Now, churches have always been a place where bigotry flows out of. Mm. You know,
slavery was justified under the scriptures.
Because, you know why? Because basically, humanity believes might makes right. Mm-hmm. That's our real underlying belief. We believe might makes right.
Well, it certainly is the belief currently of the current politics.
Not now. It's always been, Don. This has always been in existence. Not just now. Always. And until man learns there's a better way to settle things, it's going to take the spiritual energy of all religions. When 9/11 first occurred, and I was on a TV program here, they asked me that question, why? And I said, I'll tell you why. Christianity has failed. Islam has failed. Judaism has failed. The three monotheistic religions that teach surrender to God. I said they failed. And what did they fail to do? Failed to go to the roots. We need the spiritual community. All political leaders come from a human community. And it's a human community that still believes might makes right, that violence is the answer, and that's the only way we can settle things. Sometimes some people are so evil, it takes an evil to put out another evil. I don't believe in that, but a lot of people feel it's that way. But we still think that might makes right. And until we find this better way, until spiritual leadership arises in the church, like Jesus, like Muhammad, like Moses, a real, true spiritual leader, like the true prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, all these prophets would rise in all these different religions where we wouldn't fight each other. There is a tremendous prophecy in the Bible that talks about the day will come where every man will sit under his fig tree and under his vine, and we will worship. It says, you will worship in the name of your God, and we will worship in the name of the Lord our God.
We're running close to our moment where we have to conclude our show, but before we do, I want you to bless us with the Lord's Prayer spoken in the language that Jesus gave it, the language, ancient language of Aramaic. Would you bless us with that?
Yes. Right. This is the way it fell from his lips almost 2,000 years ago. Awun bashmeya netkadesh smach te'ethe malkuthach nehwe sewianak ekanna dashmeya appar howlan lah mesunkanan yamana washwok lan how vain a kanadap khanan shwakan lachaya wain la ta'linisiona ella pasabimbisha mithol vilachi malkutha heilig tishbochta la alam almin.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, every time I hear it, Dr. Errico, it's a powerful feeling. It's a feeling that the Western image of Jesus is no longer there, but it's the
the Semitic spiritual Jesus, right.
And it gets you right in the soul, and I appreciate very much you sharing that with us. Thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Errico.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. If you want to know more, listen more about Dr. Errico, he's a regular minister at Hillside Chapel and Truth Center, and provides his message on Wednesday night. You can come by the bookstore and purchase one of his books at Hillside Chapel and Truth Center. And I want to thank the viewers for being with us during this program. I hope it's been informative. I hope you've learned a new spirit. And please refer to your local listings for the rebroadcast of this show. If you want to know more about Every Church, a Peace Church, I welcome you to go to our website, which is located at www.ecapc.org. That's www.ecapc.org, and learn about what we're doing at the Every Church, a Peace Church movement. Until our next time together, be still, stay and stand in love, and pay attention. And most of all, be a peacemaker. Namaskar.